Hi there, this is Dr. Dave King. I wanted to share another case with you. This is a great case that we had recently. We had a patient come in for a consultation about a smile makeover. She was kind of sad and depressed about how her teeth looked. She'd been wearing a partial to replace that upper right lateral incisor, and she was fairly frustrated with how things fit and how things were from the standpoint of her smile. So we had a good consult. We looked at her bone support, talked about periodontal disease and her combination syndrome situation where she was missing all of her lower posterior teeth. Talked through what options we could do to create a new smile for her, and then started the treatment planning process. For me, there was really no question in my mind what modality I was going to use to restore her smile, and that would be CEREC and E.Max. I was going to do it all in-house, in the office, and design everything, mill it all, fire, stain glaze, fire it all myself. So we started out with some initial biocopy images. I like to use the biocopy images as a starting point for design usually, but allow the computer to do a lot of the bio-individual design work for me, but I will refer back to the biogeneric copy images from time to time during the design process. So here's the finalized design after maybe a half an hour's worth of design work. I designed it as a 5-unit bridge there in the upper right, 3 individual crowns, and then a 3-unit bridge on the upper left. So this again is another view of the finalized images, finalized design in the CEREC software. So it took quite a while to mill out all of the restorations, but here they are milled out in the blue form. I used I think this is shade B1 HT. I used a 40 millimeter block for the larger bridge, a 32 millimeter block for the smaller bridge, and then 3 individual C14 HT B1s in E.Max. The milling process took probably 2 or 3 hours. The nice thing was I could start a bridge and go home, or start a bridge over lunch break and allow it to mill. Once it's all milled out, what I like to do is refine the embrasures with a high-speed diamond burr, a pointed diamond burr, a very pointed needle-shaped diamond burr, to refine those embrasures and add a little bit of characterization so that it looks like enamel, so that it looks like a natural tooth, not just kind of a ball of E.Max. So here's the other bridge. I didn't spend as much time contouring this because it's much less visible. But here are all of the individual crowns. I apologize for the background there. It was not the best background to choose for those images. But we milled them all out together, polished them all individually with my 2-step polish, which you can see in one of my other YouTube videos. And then I mounted them all on the same firing plate to fire them all at the same time. And this process, in lab, start to finish after they were all milled, probably took me a solid half an hour to do the refinement, to do the polishing, and then to do the staining, which I did some staining here. A lot of times with my anterior cases, what I will like to do is to fire it once and then add some staining glaze when I can see the actual color of the tooth rather than in the blue phase like this. But in this case, I actually added the stain and glaze and then fired it. But what I've done in the past, I didn't have to do it at all in this case. What I've done in the past is I'll fire it after I stain and glaze it. If I don't like the stain and glaze, I'll cut off certain areas either with a diamond, high-speed diamond, or polish it off with a Meisinger wheel, just so that I get the stain that I like. One more view here of the bigger bridge, the 5-unit bridge. One of the challenges that I have is contouring these embrasures under the ponics. And so I like to spend quite a bit of time refining them with that high-speed diamond, the needle-pointed diamond, so that they look like natural teeth. We don't want them to look like big blobs. After refining, cutting in and polishing, the next thing is to put on the stain. And as I mentioned before in my previous videos, I don't like to glaze much. I would prefer to just stain. I don't like the texture sometimes that I get from glaze, whether it's the glaze liquid or the spray glaze. I like to polish after I stain. So here you can see some of the staining that I did. You can see I put a little bit of kind of a brownish stain there down on the gingival third. In the embrasures I used just a little bit of mahogany mixed with brown. And then some of the violet stain up along the incisal, maybe the top 2 millimeters there, to help create the illusion of translucence a little bit. The trick with the mahogany and the darker stains is use less than you think you need, because when they come out of the furnace, oftentimes the really, really dark stains will end up looking just really strange, if you've used too much, that is. I did put a little bit of brown stain on the occlusal, just to kind of highlight those concavities there, and so that it kind of broke up the surface to make it look a little bit more natural. This staining of all of these 11 units probably took me, I don't know, maybe about 10 minutes to do it all at once. So after we fired them, and you'll notice I fired them on a honeycomb tray, you have to fire these on P1. If you're using the speed crystallization cycle, the P3 cycle, you can only fire 2 restorations at a time. So I fired these all on P1 on a honeycomb tray there with object fix. And here's what they look like cooling down after they came out of the furnace. It takes a while for it to cool, especially these large bridges. And one of the fun things that I like to watch is the color changes. When it's really, really hot, they're actually a lot darker in color. But as they cool down, then the color tends to brighten to the selected block color. One thing that I'll mention to you also is I always, after it comes out of the furnace, will polish over the stain again. Now, it doesn't have to be a very detailed, very time-consuming polish, but I will polish over the stain again, just to make sure that there are no rough spots, no rough areas, no kind of, the object fix can create some unevenness right along the margin area. So I want to polish that over again, sometimes with that gray wheel, sometimes with just the brush with some polishing paste prior to delivery to make sure that it's totally smooth for the patient. So we actually had the patient back 2 days after we imaged, so I could insert all of these restorations. And here's her initial smile. We had talked through before how she had some gingival spacing, some issues periodontally, which is being treated. So she was not averse to having some little gaps, which she had before. I'll show you the before and the after pictures right next to each other. But she was extremely pleased with the outcome of the restoration. Now, she had a little bit of asymmetry in the anterior, which in order to maintain the appropriate spacing and the size of the teeth, we had to maintain some of that asymmetry. So her midline is not perfectly ideal, but she was very, very happy with the restoration. She was beaming when she left the office. For all those of you who've done cases like this, this is really fun because the patient really is transformed. And a lot of times the ladies in particular will shed a tear or two just being so happy they can see, they can smile again without being embarrassed. So here's the asymmetry I was talking about. Lower right, the canine was a little bit longer. Her midline is just a little bit to her right, maybe a quarter of the tooth. But she was so used to her midline being so far off that she was just overjoyed to see things the way they were. I left the incisal edge a little bit uneven, and I suggested to her if she had any concerns about it, we would easily alter that, happily alter that for her to make sure it was perfect. But she was a transformed woman. It was great to be able to provide this service to her. One thing I'll mention to you in closing is that there's a lot of work that goes into doing a case like this. Number one, making sure the patient has realistic expectations and understands that this is a process. This is not a one appointment and we're done. This is a process, and sometimes that process involves multiple adjustments, maybe even redoing a crown or two, altering contours, etc., etc. A case like this usually is a process and not a matter of 1 or 2 appointments. So setting appropriate expectations, making sure the patient understands that we're working together toward a common goal, helps to stave off any possible future issues with ill will or misunderstanding. So set a really clear understanding at the outset, what they should expect, postoperative symptoms, potential for future need for endodontic therapy, periodontal treatment and maintenance, etc., etc. Secondarily, This is a lot of in-lab or in-office work for us. I could have sent this out to the lab either through CEREC Connect or through an impression and just had them do all that work. But I was able to do it all myself in the office, and I had some time, which allowed me to do it. But it was, a good couple of hours of work where I had to devote to, designing and milling and polishing and staining and glazing and firing and adjusting and et cetera, et cetera. So it was a little bit of work. So bear that in mind when you tackle a case like this with CEREC. But thirdly, and maybe most importantly for me, is the ability to control the whole process start to finish. The ability to see the end, see the results on the screen in the CEREC. I'll demonstrate in another video a smile design where you actually import a patient photo into the CEREC design software, allowing you to actually visualize their smile with the designing teeth on their face on the screen, which is really, really cool. But this was a great opportunity to serve this patient. Lots of fun, lots of work, but definitely worth the outcome. Thanks for watching.